The applause was so loud it vibrated through the glass walls of the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father said. His voice smooth, practiced, amplified. "The sole genius behind the Aries system, my son Brent." The room erupted, champagne flutes lifted. Investors stood. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Brent rose from his seat with that crooked grin he'd practiced in mirrors his entire life, waving like he'd just cured cancer instead of memorizing a speech he didn't understand. I didn't move. I stood frozen at the edge of the stage, badge still clipped to my blazer, palms numb, brain struggling to process the sentence I just heard. Sole genius. My brother, who once asked me if Python was the snake one or the coffee one, was being crowned for a system I'd spent 10 years building. 10 years of missed holidays. 10 years of sleeping under my desk. 10 years of rewriting control logic at 3 a.m. because a prosthetic hand trembled half a millimeter too much. My father, Edward, handed Brent the microphone like he was passing down a crown. That was when he leaned in toward me, close enough that no one else could hear, his smile never breaking. "Don't make a scene," he whispered. "You're just the mechanic." The word landed harder than the applause. "Mechanics don't get equity," he continued, still smiling for the cameras. "Smile, stand there, or we revisit your severance package." My chest tightened, but my face stayed still. That was the rule in our family. Feel nothing. Show less. That I understood the ultimatum instantly. Smile and be erased quietly, or push back and lose everything I'd earned. My badge, my access, my last thread of financial safety. The power imbalance was total. Founder, father, Theo, and me. His inconvenient daughter who'd built the engine but wasn't allowed to touch the steering wheel, so I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I reached up, unclipped my security badge, and placed it gently on the polished mahogany table beside the stage. IT made a soft click when it hit the wood. No one heard it. The applause swallowed the sound completely. I turned and walked. I passed investors buzzing about a $1.2 billion valuation. Engineers clinking glasses they didn't realize they'd soon be unemployed from. Reporters praising a breakthrough none of them understood. Behind me, Aries Medtech, my life's work, was being toasted. Ahead of me, silence, and somewhere between the champagne and the exit doors, a quiet thought settled in my mind with absolute clarity. They had no idea how it actually worked. Show them, Aries was a miracle box. To me, it was code, calibration, and contingency. Layers upon layers only one person truly understood. Without me, that billion-dollar system was about to become the world's most expensive paperweight. Before I go on, pause for a second. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And tell me this. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work and expect you to smile through it? Because if you have, you already know what comes next. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. I slid into my 10-year-old sedan, the driver's seat cracked, the engine reluctant as ever. I turned the key twice before it finally coughed to life. Inside the car, the celebration music thumped faintly through the building walls behind me. Bass heavy, triumphant, oblivious. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, 32 years old, watching my reflection in the windshield. "I have been a ghost," I said out loud. For a decade, I'd existed in whiteboard equations and lab shadows. No press photos. No credit slides. No applause. Just results. Aries wasn't an app or a demo toy. It was Class 3 robotic prosthetics. Neural-linked limbs designed to restore movement to people who'd lost it. Precision mattered. One wrong parameter, and a hand crushed instead of grasped. One misunderstood subroutine, and a patient never trusted the tech again. And now, the people celebrating it didn't even know where the safeguards lived. I looked back once at the glowing building, at my father's empire humming behind glass. Then I put the car in drive. I walked out. My brother Brent, the architect, that's what the press called him after the launch. The visionary. The mind. The man behind the miracle. Here's what they didn't know. Brent can't spell compliance without autocorrect. He treated company accounts like a personal casino. Late-night wire transfers. Temporary loans. Money moved so often I stopped asking where it went and started asking how fast I could fix it. He gambled on apps, on crypto, on anything that promised a rush. Then he'd lose. And then he'd panic. And then he'd call me. My 20s disappeared into his messes. 18-hour days weren't heroic. They were survival. I rewrote firmware after he pushed untested updates. I patched control loops when his shortcuts caused instability. I sat in sterile labs at dawn rerunning simulations because a prosthetic knee jittered 1 degree off spec. And 1 degree was the difference between walking and falling. People think tech failures mean downtime. In medtech, they mean bodies that I prevented deaths quietly. I installed redundant safety protocols he didn't understand. I signed every single safety log because he didn't have the license to do it himself. When auditors came, I was the one answering questions while he smiled and talked vision. I was the safety net beneath his constant freefall. If the system worked, he got the credit. If it didn't, I got the call at 2 a.m. So why did I stay? That's the question everyone asks once the betrayal becomes obvious. Why didn't you leave earlier? Why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you protect yourself? Because cruelty, when it's steady and familiar, stops feeling like cruelty. There's a term for it. Normalized cruelty. It's not the explosive abuse people recognize. It's quieter, methodical. Edward was brilliant at it. He didn't scream, he calibrated. He taught us early that love was conditional and value was transactional. You weren't loved because you existed. You were tolerated because you were useful in our house. Usefulness had a hierarchy. Brent was valuable because he was the son. I was valuable because I fixed things. When I succeeded, it was expected. When I failed, it was remembered. Edward praised outcomes, never effort. He withheld affection like a resource you had to earn back. Approval came in crumbs. Disapproval came in silence. And silence was terrifying, so I learned to be indispensable. To solve problems before they were named. To anticipate needs. To become so necessary that removing me felt impossible. That's how normalized cruelty works. It convinces you that endurance is loyalty and self-erasure is love. The pattern started long before Aries. I was 12 the first time I understood my role. State Science Fair. Blue ribbon. My project, an early neural feedback model, won first place. I came home shaking with pride. Ribbon clutched in my hand like proof that I mattered. Edward was in the living room. I held it up. Dad, I won. He didn't even look instead. He nodded toward the floor where Brent sat crying over a broken toy car. Wheels snapped clean off. Brent was 10. Furious. Loud. Center stage. Edward pointed. Fix it, Mia. I stood there, ribbon in my hand, waiting for him to notice. He never did. Later that night, after I'd repaired the toy with glue and patience, Edward finally spoke to me. Certain. Your brother is the statue, he said. You are the pedestal. I frowned. I didn't understand. Statues are admired, he continued. They're what people come to see. Pedestals aren't noticed. They're necessary. Then he looked at me directly. Without you, he falls. So don't you dare move. That sentence became my operating system. I wasn't the art. I was the support structure. Not the star, gravity. My worth came from holding someone else upright, even if it meant being invisible. Good daughter meant self-immolation. They trained me to disappear so well they believed it would last forever. That I would keep absorbing pressure, fixing damage, and standing still. They never considered what would happen if the pedestal stepped away. Because if you remove it, the statue doesn't wobble, it crashes to the ground. I looked at my hands. The same hands that wrote the control architecture when Aries was still a sketch on a whiteboard. The hands that calibrated torque thresholds so prosthetic fingers wouldn't crush a child's toy, or a human wrist. The hands that signed off on every safety override, every redundancy, every quiet fix that kept patients alive. Those hands were resting in my lap when my phone vibrated, a vibration I knew better than my own heartbeat. 5 to 00 p.m. on the DOT. IT had buzzed at that exact time every single day for 3,600 days. Aries Central Server. Biometric handshake required. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know the words. 10 years of repetition had burned them into my nervous system. Edward thought power lived in titles, offices, plastic badges clipped to blazers. He never understood that real power lives in continuity. And continuity lived with me. The Aries system wasn't autonomous. Not legally. Not ethically. Every Class 3 medical device required a licensed Level 5 administrator to authorize live operations. That wasn't a ceremonial role. It was a biological one. The final key wasn't a password or a server token, it was my fingerprint. My pulse pattern. My micro-tremor signature. A biometric handshake so precise it couldn't be faked, outsourced, or bypassed without triggering a global shutdown. The phone buzzed again, heavier this time. I unlocked it. Biometric handshake required. Level 5 Administrator. Accept or decline. 2 buttons glowed on the screen. Green. Red. For 10 years I had pressed green without thinking. I pressed it on Christmas mornings while my family opened gifts in the next room, laughter muffled through walls while I stared at code. I pressed it from a bathroom stall at my best friend's wedding reception, dress pooled around my ankles while the DJ announced the first dance. I pressed it with a fever of 102, shivering under blankets, laptop balanced on my knees. I pressed it during dates, excusing myself with fake smiles. I pressed it in a hospital hallway while waiting to see my grandmother one last time, and again hours later after we buried her. That button wasn't a safeguard, it was a leash. Every time I pressed green, a billion-dollar operation breathed. Every time I accepted, markets stayed open, devices stayed online, surgeons stayed confident. My consent was the thin line between innovative technology and global recall, and I gave it freely, religiously. Because patience mattered more than pride. Edward's fatal mistake was thinking that firing me severed the connection. He thought the badge was the power, the office, title, the visibility. He believed removing me from the room removed me from the system. But he built a kingdom of Class 3 medical devices. And those devices didn't answer to founders. They answered to the licensed monarch, WY pushing me out. He hadn't removed a liability, he'd exiled the queen. I propped my tablet against the steering wheel and tapped into the company livestream. The launch was being broadcast globally. Markets in Tokyo, London, New York all tuned in. There was my father, laughing, glass raised, surrounded by men congratulating each other. Brent stood beside him, chest puffed, nodding as if he understood any of what was happening on stage. The Ares Mark IV prototype sat beneath spotlights, my masterpiece, titanium fingers curved with impossible grace as it played a piano sonata. Fluid, precise, human. The crowd leaned forward, entranced. Comment feeds exploded. Stock tickers climbed in real time. Edward leaned toward an investor, smiling wide. Zero equity. His whisper echoed in my memory. My thumb hovered over the screen. Green meant safety. Stability. Swallowing the insult, hoping foolishly that usefulness might earn mercy someday. Green meant being the pedestal forever. Red meant war. Red meant markets freezing mid-celebration. Surgeons staring at locked interfaces. Compliance alarms screaming. Every Ares device requesting authorization and receiving silence. My thumb didn't shake. There was no hesitation. I pressed decline. Authorization denied. Biometric handshake refused. Emergency protocol initiated. On the live stream, the piano stopped mid-note. The titanium fingers froze in the air. Edward's smile faltered. And for the first time in my life, the system listened to me instead of him. The piano music stopped. Not gradually. Not with a fade or a stutter. 1 second, the Ares Mark IV was mid-sonata. Titanium fingers gliding across ivory keys. And the next, absolute silence. The arm didn't slow, it froze, locked in a protective rigor mortis position, fingers hovering millimeters above the keyboard, joints rigid by design. A safety posture so sudden it felt violent. The final note never landed. The silence that followed was louder than the applause had been. Edward frowned. He tapped his champagne glass lightly, as if sound might summon motion back into existence. He laughed once, short, uncertain, and waved a hand in front of the motion sensors. Nothing. The arm stayed dead. Then the alarm began. Beep. 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 A flat, FDA-mandated tone designed to be impossible to ignore. Cut through the room like a metronome for panic. Conversations died mid-sentence. Investors stopped drinking. Glasses hovered, forgotten, inches from lips. Brent rushed the stage. All the color drained from his face as he dropped to the console, fingers flying across the screen. He stabbed at commands he didn't understand, cycling menus too fast to read, reopening panels like they might magically rearrange themselves into sense. It was painful to watch, like a child trying to fly a spaceship by banging the dashboard. He tried to override the lock. Denied. He tried to reboot the local interface. Denied. He unplugged and replugged a cable, as if this were a home router and not a regulated medical system streaming compliance logs directly to federal servers. Denied. 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 Every failed attempt only made the truth louder. The architect had no idea how his own building worked behind him. The massive presentation screen flickered. The Ares logo vanished, and in its place, a red banner scrolled across the display. Bold, centered, clinical. No dramatics. No threats. Just fact. System locked down. Unauthorized operation detected. Licensed supervisor missing. All units disabled. The message repeated in 3 languages. There was no way to spin it. No ambiguity to exploit. It wasn't an error. It was a verdict. Edward's smile collapsed completely. He spun in a slow circle, eyes scanning the room. Investors, engineers, executives, searching for someone to fix this. For someone to blame. For someone to command. And then, with horrifying clarity, he realized who wasn't there. His gaze snapped to the doors. Too late. And my car. I took a sip of lukewarm water from the cup holder and watched the chaos unfold on my tablet. No rush. No thrill. Just calm. The system was doing exactly what I designed it to do. And the show was just beginning. My phone rang. I picked up. Edward's face flashed onto my screen, distorted by the shaky front camera and the chaos behind him. I'd assigned him a siren ringtone years ago. Private joke. Turns out it fit. Turn it back on right now, am I? His voice was so loud it cracked my speaker. The FDA alarm blared in the background. Beep, beep, beep. Punctuated by investors shouting and chairs scraping against marble floors. Someone swore. Someone else yelled about market exposure. I know you rigged it. Edward roared. Brent leaned into frame, sweat streaking his temples, fingers still mashing dead buttons on the console like they might surrender out of pity. I waited for the shouting to crest, then spoke evenly. I didn't rig anything. Don't lie to me. I'm not, I said. I'm just the mechanic. The words tasted different this time. You can't authorize without a level 5 administrator, I continued. And I don't work there anymore. Edward's face went red. Don't give me that technical garbage. You put a virus in the system. I know you did. It's not a virus, I replied. It's a feature. I will sue you for everything you have, he spat. I will bury you so deep you'll never work again. I exhaled slowly. Dad, this is a Class 3 medical device. Federal law requires continuous license supervision. 24 hours. No exceptions. I don't care about the law, he screamed. There's $1 billion deal on the table. Fix it. Now. There was a scuffle. The phone shifted. Then my mother's face replaced his, eyes wide, breathy, already crying. Mia, Cynthia sobbed, voice high and shaking. How could you do this to your brother? The pivot. This was his big night, she continued. Everyone's watching. Do you have any idea how cruel you're being? I said nothing. Why are you trying to destroy this family? She wailed. Why can't you just help him one more time? Not one word about me being fired. Not one question about being erased. Just grief that the party had stopped. You chose your side, I said quietly. Her expression hardened in an instant. The tears vanished like a switch flipped. We gave you a job, she snapped. We fed you. We let you play scientist in our company. There it was. You embarrassed us tonight, she hissed. After everything we've done for you. Edward ripped the phone back, breathing ragged. Give me the override code, he demanded. I won't call the police. There is no code, I said. You know that. Don't. The system scans a unique vascular pattern, I continued. Microcapillary flow in the thumb. It's tied to one biometric signature. Yours, he barked. Yes, I agreed. Mine. Come back, he said. Right now. You fired me. I'll make it right. Mechanics don't get equity, I reminded him, silence stretched thin. 50% of the company, I said. You have 5 minutes. Or my thumb stays with me. You can't just walk away with the keys to $1 billion company, Edward said, disbelief bleeding into fear. I met his stare through the screen. I just did. I paused, letting the FDA alarm scream behind him. Good luck with the investors, Dad, I added softly. They hate surprises. I tapped red. End called. I walked back into the Ares lobby expecting lawyers. Settlement language. Numbers with zeros. Quiet rooms and whispered concessions. I was still naive enough to believe that when narcissists lose, they negotiate. Security guard Henderson wouldn't meet my eyes. His hand shook as he buzzed me through. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than the last decade combined. I told myself this was the endgame. Ugly but solvable. I forgot one thing. Cornered narcissists don't negotiate. They annihilate. The boardroom doors opened to a room heavy with silence. Investors sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes cold. Brent leaned against the wall. Scrolling his phone like this was an inconvenience. Edward stood at the head of the table, calm, too calm. Adjusting his cufflinks, I cleared my throat. Let's talk about equity. Edward sighed deeply, the way a man does when he wants witnesses to his sadness. I didn't want it to end like this, he said. The side door exploded open. 4 men surged in with sharp, practiced movements. Navy windbreakers. Yellow letters that punched the air from my lungs, B.I. Mia Vance, one agent barked. Hands where I can see them. What? I said, barely a sound. Corporate espionage. Wire fraud. Ransomware extortion. My wrist was grabbed. I was spun around so fast the room blurred. Edward shook his head slowly. Devastated father incarnate. An agent slapped a thick manila folder on the table. She rigged our system, Edward said mournfully. Planted a virus. Demanded 50% ownership to unlock it. It's a safety protocol, I said. Check the code. Save it for the judge. The agent snapped. Cold steel closed around my wrists. The click echoed like a gunshot. I stood there, handcuffed, after 10 years of keeping them alive, compliant, profitable. An investor stared at me with pure disgust. Not at the truth. At the story they'd been fed. Brent pushed off the wall. Grinning, he leaned close enough that I smelled expensive scotch. Dad's always one step ahead, he whispered. Think you could steal my company? He smiled wider. Enjoy prison. Across the room, my mother stood silent. No tears now. Eyes glued to the carpet. The monster she helped raise finally fed. You know this is a lie, I said to Edward. He raised his voice theatrically. We tried to help you. Gave you a job. Gave you purpose. And you betrayed us. An agent shoved me forward. Let's go. As they marched me toward the door, my mind raced. They couldn't beat me technically, so they buried me legally. Frame. Clean. Public. Final, then. Wait. The word cut through the room like a blade point. One of the investors stood, pointing at the frozen prototype on the screen behind Edward. Red warning still flashing. That error code, he said slowly, isn't ransomware. It's federal compliance. Edward froze. The investor turned to the agent. Look up 21 CFR Part 11. Phones came out. Tablets. A murmur rippled. Removing the only licensed supervisor, the investor continued, voice rising, forces a mandatory shutdown. By law. An agent frowned. Another scrolled faster. The truth unraveled fast once someone actually checked. The logs weren't hacks. They were safety audits. The real violations lit up like fireworks. Brent overriding torque limits, falsifying compliance timestamps, manipulating performance data to inflate valuation. That's why they fired me. The billion-dollar deal wasn't innovation, IT was fraud. The room erupted, handcuffs came off my wrists. They snapped onto Edwards. Then Brent's point. 3 months later, Ares MedTech didn't exist. Seized. Liquidated. Bankrupt, Brent pled out. Prison.my mother begged for money. I didn't answer it. I returned once. To buy back the equipment for my new firm. Edward screamed at movers stripping his office bare, power draining with every empty shelf. When he tried to command me one last time, I didn't slow. Outside, sunlight hit my face. I unlocked my own servers, my name, my license, my future, because sometimes the only way forward is to let the wrong system collapse and build your own. Finally, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your feedback in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story.